Yeah. Oh, look at these two. All right, come on. You're okay? Oh, what? Either they're having an affair or they're just very shy.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Behavioral Arts. My name is Spidey, and I use my degree in sociology and psychology, my certifications in criminal interrogation and body language analysis, and over 10 years' experience as an award-winning mentalist to teach people behavioral analysis and practical psychology on stage and television shows all over the world. In one of the most viral and talked about videos that the internet has seen in a long time, former CEO of the data company Astronomer, Byron, and Chief People Officer, Kristin Cabot, were caught on the Jumbotron during a Coldplay concert, locked in an intimate embrace. But the moment they noticed the cameras, everything changed. Now, I don't think that a single person who saw that video, and that's a lot of people, needs a body language analyst to tell you that there was something inappropriate or awkward going on in that moment. In fact, I think my cat read the situation correctly. They weren't supposed to be doing that? Yeah, he knows it was awkward. So although I got a lot of requests to cover this topic, I didn't want this video to be me using decades of experience to look at it and go, I think this indicates that they're cheating or doing something that they're not supposed to do. And that's really the beauty of this situation. To me, this is such a great example of how sometimes body language speaks so loud that anybody in the world can look at it and go, whoa, something's going on. These two should not be doing that. They got caught doing something without them saying a single word. Instead, what I wanted to focus on in this video is two things. One, what are the specific cues that people saw that allowed them to know that this is awkward? But two, and most importantly, if these cues were more subtle in a day-to-day situation, how would you be able to spot this exact thing with the same amount of confidence, but if it wasn't this obvious? Okay, so for part one, the tells that allowed most people to know that something's up, we're gonna do this in a really fun and interactive way. So a couple of days ago on the Facebook page of the Behavioral Arts, as well as a community post, I asked you, the viewers, to tell me when you saw the video, how did you know? What are the specific things that you saw that allowed you to know, hold on a minute, they're doing something they're not supposed to be doing? So on the day that I'm filming this video, I took all those comments, and there are hundreds, and I made a list of all the behaviors that people saw that indicated to them that something's wrong. And next to each one, I put down the number of times that it came up in the comments. And as it turns out, there were 15 behaviors that people noticed in this video. There were a few more that were named less than 5 times, but they come close enough to these other behaviors that we can make a very good list of 15 behaviors. So we're gonna do this in a game show or Family Feud style. If you haven't had a chance to look at the video analytically yet, I'm gonna play it for you in a moment. And whether you write it down or make a mental list, note all the behaviors that you're seeing that would allow you to know that something's going on here. They're not supposed to be in this situation. Something's wrong. Make a list of those behaviors. Then we're going to go through the list of the top 15 answers.
Yeah. Oh, look at these two. All right, come on. You're okay? Oh, what? Either they're having an affair or they're just very shy. Yeah. Oh, look at these two. All right, come on. You're okay? Oh, what? Either they're having an affair or they're just very shy.
Okay, so there it was. If you need to go back and look at it again, go ahead and do so. And make a list of behaviors that to you indicate that something's off. They're doing something they're not supposed to be doing. And now we're gonna go through the list of the most commonly seen behaviors. And I gotta say, when I asked this question to my community, there was a behavior that I thought would come up the most often in your observations, and it wasn't the most often. It was a mix of the third and the fourth. So it was up there, but not the first one. But anyways, let's start with the 15th most named behavior. This was named 16 times in hundreds of comments, and it's a good spot. It's hand clenching or grasping. And you'll notice this with him, with Andy. It's the moment they split. If you look at his hands, at first they're pretty relaxed when they're on her. The fingers are out like this. And as we relax, when we're relaxed, those fingers tend to relax outwards like this. As we get nervous, it's funny. One of two things could happen. Either they completely flex outwards like this, and this is called a stop gesture, and we see this pretty much everywhere in the world as a sign for stop or no, or they go inwards. And this is something we see more with stress, anger, or the thought of aggression or even cringe. And if you look at him, the moment his hands separate from her, they go from that relaxed position to inwards like this rather quickly, and then they quickly move to that glass in front of him that he holds on to. And this could be just him holding on to it to be balanced on his way down because he wants to hide behind the glass. But sometimes when we are feeling a little nervous or self-conscious, we do hold on to objects around us. It's a way to like brace ourselves. So I think it's a really good note, and that was number 15. Number 14 is a really interesting one. It only came up 19 times, and I think I know why it didn't come up more often. And it's eyes scanning or darting. And here's the thing about this. We have to start clocking the behaviors after they notice that they're on the screen. So it's at the moment where they register it. And she notices it before he does. I think the behaviors indicate that very much so, but it's after that moment. So there is a quick scan. We'll talk about that in a second, but all I want to say is in the beginning, she's kind of swaying like this. That doesn't really count. She hasn't seen it yet. We haven't added the stimulus. It's after that. But after they split, she turns away, he ducks down. We do see her kind of looking around a little, but there's a lot of focus on this woman next to her over here who is just a behavioral gift. So although she's scanning a little bit, she's really focused on this woman next to her, I think as a cue to see through her, okay, is it done? Are we off the screen? Are we in the clear now? Or to try to get some eye contact with her to be like, hey, help me out here, what's going on? But she's not getting that at all. That woman is not budging. But all this to say that scanning, social scanning is very much part of our reaction to embarrassment everywhere in the world. So there's a lot of great research done on the way we react to social embarrassment. And usually, not always, but usually the first thing that happens is a quick chin downwards like this. And this is probably the shame or negativity setting in. Then typically two things follow that. One is a small smile, and this is us just trying to save face, like, everything's okay, don't worry, everything's cool. And the second one is the social scan. So they could happen together like this, or they could happen with the smile first and then the social scan, or the social scan and then the smile. They're very close to one another in timing. And then the last thing is, whether it's just with our head or with our full body, or we just walk away, we disengage from the situation. And I know that a lot of you are finding that pretty interesting because we're going to see a lot of these behaviors in this situation as well. But in her case, it's almost like we're instantly seeing that negativity and the hiding, then immediately to disengagement. That's her first initial thought. And then at the end of that, we're getting a bit of this social scanning. So that conscious social awareness is only coming in at the end once she feels like she's gotten far away from the situation as possible. And we're going to talk about why that happens in a little bit. Number 13 was an interesting one. Didn't come up too often, 21 times. And it's that there's something about breathing. Very few people who noted this elaborated, but that there's some kind of thing related to a breath or an inhale. Now, if we look at her, we do see something with the mouth and that shock, and that mouth opens up, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But it's not necessarily a deep breath in and of itself. It could be, it would make sense that there would be a sharp inhale there because this does happen with what's going on with her in that moment, but I wouldn't specifically separate that from the open mouth and that freeze response, which we're gonna get to definitely in a second. So I could see why it wasn't named that often because it makes sense there, but it's not like we're all of a sudden seeing this upper chest breathing. We can assume it might be happening, but it's not that obvious. So for me, it's a question mark on the breath. It's a safe assumption, but it's not a very clear indication that it's happening. Number 12 is an interesting one that came up only 23 times, and there's a lot to say about this. So it was blushing, or as we call it in behavioral analysis sometimes, facial flushing. And this is quite simply when the face becomes red. And this is typically because in moments of stress, the blood rushes to our head and it changes the complexion. So let's talk about both of them separately. For him, for Andy, there isn't a blushing that happens in this video, because usually the way we know if there's blushing is we look at the beginning of a situation, then when the stress happened, then after that, and see if the complexion is more red. In this case, he is red at the end, but he's also red at the beginning. He starts off as being red. Now you can argue that in his case, he's already blushing to begin with, because he's in a situation that he's not supposed to be with, so he's already nervous about that. I can't really tell you that because I don't know what his baseline complexion is, so that's a maybe. But in her case, it's a little more interesting because if we look at the end, when she turns to look at this person that's to her left, and we look at the side of her face, it is a little bit more red than it was earlier. She wasn't as red as he was in the beginning. So I think it's a good note that there's some flushing going on with her, but with him, inconclusive. Number 11 is another really interesting one, and I wonder if some people separated this from another answer that we're going to see a little further above, because we're not seeing the typical way that we would see this. So 28 people said that there were some self-soothing gestures. Now let's talk about those gestures. In the research, they have a lot of different names: adapters, manipulators, pacifiers, self-soothing gestures, and typically these are massage-like repetitive gestures that help us self-soothe in stressful situations. And there's a lot of research that shows that when stress spikes, these types of gestures tend to spike as well. Could be on the hands, the legs, around the body, the arms can be on the face. Sometimes even we do it with the tongue like this, but it's there to reduce stress. We didn't see typical self-soothing gestures here. We didn't see one of them start to like rub their arms or turn away and maybe start to see like some neck rubbing or some hand rubbing like this. We didn't see those things. So I'm wondering if the people who are saying self-soothing mean the hands on the face like this, which would get paired with another gesture that we saw above. So all this to say, there aren't typical self-soothing gestures here, which I think is the reason why this is pretty low on the list. But we might look at, keeping the hands on the face like this, especially we can't see, her back is turned. If there's anything like this in the least, that would be self-soothing. So yeah. Okay, now we're gonna count down the top 10 behaviors that you guys saw that allowed you to know that something's off here. And we're gonna talk about the number one thing that's missing that you can use in day-to-day situations to know when it's much more subtle, but something is wrong. Something is happening that shouldn't be happening. But before we do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button, turn the notifications on for more behavioral analysis and practical psychology content. All right, starting the countdown with number 10. And this is something that I think only came up 33 times because it's not obvious. It kind of feels like it might be happening, but it's not enormously clear, and it's an awkward laughter or embarrassed smile. And the reason I say it's not very obvious is because when they're facing the camera, a lot of things happen, but smiles aren't one of them. However, if we look at him as he's crouching, it kind of seems like there might be a smile there. Obviously, people are laughing, having a good time. And remember, with embarrassment, we do smile to save face. Like, nothing to see here, it's all good. So it's possible that on the way down, it kind of looks, it's not that clear, but it looks like there might be a smile there. It's the same with her. When she turns to her left, it seems like, just in the mood, there might be a bit of like an awkward laugh or smile happening there. Again, I don't think it's 100% sure, but it kind of feels like it might be happening. I do agree with that. But I think it's this ambiguity that is the reason that this didn't make, say, the top 5, and 33 people brought it up. So I think it's a good note. It might be happening, but it's not crystal clear. Number 9 in our countdown, and I think the reason this one only came up 46 times is because a lot of people would have mushed it with the second most common answer. So I think a lot of people, when you said the second one, didn't feel the need to also say this one. So number 9 is freezing or hesitation. And we see it much more on him than on her. Her reaction is pretty quick. It's almost like the second she sees it, those hands shoot up, she turns away. But with him, we see a moment of freezing and hesitation, which is very common in these situations, especially with the emotion that they're both very likely feeling based on some of these other gestures we're going to talk about. Freezing is very normal. In fact, in any moment where we feel caught off guard, shocked, surprised, we see that freeze reaction as our body assesses what's going on. Usually it comes with a lot of other things that are further up this list. Number 8 came up 49 times, and I was really, really happy to see it on a lot of your lists, because if it wasn't there, I'd be like, why do I make these videos? Because it's something I talk about a lot. And granted, it was very, very subtle. So if you missed it, please don't feel bad, but it's an eyebrow flash or an eyebrow raise. And his is so subtle. It's so subtle that it's hard to see, especially because he's moving his head up as he's doing that. So it's harder to see that smaller gesture. Hers is a little bit more obvious, but it's very fast. And basically, when they see themselves on the screen, both of them, their eyebrows go up for a quick second. And I'm so happy this happened, because on the channel we talk a lot about eyebrow flashes. It's one of the things that I pay the most attention to, because in the way that we evolved, research has shown that we gained a lot of eyebrow mobility because of how important they are to our communication. We communicate a lot with our eyebrows, and as a live entertainer, I know this, because my 100th row in a theater can't see what I'm doing with my eyes, but they can see what I'm doing with my eyebrows. And the research shows that subconsciously we pay more attention to the eyebrows than to the eyes. And it helped us throughout the history of humans to communicate across great distances. For this reason, we know that in social situations, that eyebrow going up typically means one of 3 things. One is either emphasis, we emphasize things with the eyebrows, things that are important. 2 is some kind of social greeting, some kind of social approval. So, you see someone you know and the eyebrows go up in a greeting, very common. And the third, and it's the one we see the least commonly on the channel, is with surprise. When we're surprised, everything opens up and those eyebrows go up. And this is exactly what that was. So I guess it's pretty clear to everyone at this point that the basic, universal human emotion that they're both feeling in this moment at first is surprise. And we'll talk a lot about that emotion and how you could spot it when it's more subtle and all these different things. But one of the telltale signs of surprise is those eyebrows going up. Again, everything opens up with surprise. I want to throw in something very important at this point, which might explain why some of you may not have named some of the behaviors on this list. In this scenario, anything that indicates surprise, right? Whether it's the eyebrows up, whether it's the eyes open, whether it's the jaw opening up, in and of itself does not indicate that anything is wrong. They could simply be surprised that they're on the jumbo screen. This is something that we would see very commonly, right? When the camera cuts, you might go, oh my God, look, we're on the screen. And then might go more into happy things. So the surprise in and of itself is not much of an issue. It's what happens with that surprise. And we're going to go into a lot more details about this later, because in the real world, this will really help you with your behavioral analysis. But just for now, important note, the surprise in and of itself, not that big a deal. Which brings us to number 7 in the countdown. This was spotted 61 times, and this is the mouth opening or the jaw dropping, which is another telltale sign of surprise. So universally, everywhere in the world, when someone's surprised, that mouth either slightly opens or full on opens. And the reason this happens is because surprise is a very quick state of assessment. So things open up to help us assess the situation. And we believe the reason the mouth opens is to get more oxygen to the body, because we might have to react, right? We don't know what this is. We're trying to figure it out. Let's get some air in case we have to run away, in case we have to, confront this thing. So your body's trying to get more information and more oxygen to react. So if we look at these two, with him, it wasn't so much a big mouth opening as much as it was the mouth relaxing open. But we do see that this kind of drop. With her, we do see a much bigger kind of opening for that potential gasp. So when people said earlier that breath, it's kind of implied with the mouth opening, right? Because that's why it happens. We need to take that breath in. So I think a lot of people probably just said, okay, the mouth is opening. And some of you said, there's some potential there that it's because she needs that big breath of air in. I'm going to mush 5 and 6 together because they're very similar, and it all happens so fast that it's kind of hard to draw a line between the two. All very similar. So number 6, which was named 70 times, is postural shrinking, or the term we use often in behavioral analysis, which is turtling, which is when things close in like this, right? Just like a turtle who retreats into the shell. And number 5 was hiding or ducking down. So she used her hands and turned away, but we didn't see her become smaller. But him, we saw all this, right? He became smaller and smaller and hid behind the glass. So this is a very typical behavior that we see in any situation where someone is trying to get away from something. And it won't always be this obvious. It's not like you're in a meeting or an interrogation and you name something that the person has some kind of discomfort with and they try to hide behind the desk. But you might see in a situation somebody becoming smaller, those shoulders coming up to protect the neck, maybe the hands turn inwards, protecting the wrists, things, the arms come closer to the body to protect the vital organs. So these are all subtle things that you could spot in a situation to know, okay, wait, something's awkward here, something's wrong, which wouldn't be this obvious, but still very telling. Number 4, and this is the one that I thought was going to be named the most often. It wasn't, but at least it made the top 4, and 108 people mentioned this, and it's the fact that they physically separated from each other. Now, this has a lot of nuance, because this has a lot more meaning given a lot of the other things that we're seeing. In other words, alone, in a situation like this, it may not be that odd if it was just that, right? Because I can imagine a Jumbotron going on a couple and they're shy, they don't really want to be on this. So they might kind of playfully separate a little, look at each other, a little bit of a smile like, nah, I don't want to. We see that a lot on Jumbotrons. Like, or, like if it was not a couple, if it was like, oh no, this is my sister, bleh, whatever. So if there was a playfulness to it, it wouldn't be that bad. But because of a lot of the other things that we're seeing, the fact that they instantly separated is very interesting. Number 3, I'm getting excited here, came up 122 times, and it's something we saw her doing mostly, and it's turning away. The head and the body turning away. And we saw that with her, it was almost instant. We saw the hands coming up to hide, and then she continued down that hiding path by turning away. He tried to hide behind transparent glass, she turned away. So these were both, we talked about it, mechanisms to get away from something. And again, in the real world situations, look for times where this would be more subtle. For example, something called exit checking is a really good example. a topic comes up, someone's a little stressed about it, doesn't want to be in this situation, you might not see them completely turn away like this, but you might see all of a sudden their attention go towards the door. They might look towards the door subtly. You might see all of a sudden their body turn away a little bit. So it wouldn't be as obvious, this scale, but you could definitely see this kind of avoidance in real world situations all the time. The second most common behavior that came up, and I'm so glad that it came up 131 times. Great job, team, we did it, yay. And the reason I'm happy about this is because it's very subtle, but in the real world, you're much more likely to see this. From someone who's not being this obvious, this is one of the things that we see very commonly, and it's the eyes opening wide. And we definitely saw it with her when she saw herself. We saw those eyes open up as the jaw dropped. And with him, it's kind of, we see all the markers of surprise, right? We see that subtle eyebrow flash, we see the jaw drop, and almost as a result, we see the eyes, it's more subtle, open up. Because like at first he's smiling, he's happy, right? So there's a bit of a squint with that, but as he realizes and the jaw relaxes, those eyes open up with that. When somebody experiences the emotion of surprise, first of all, it's a very fast emotion. Of all the universal emotions, it's one that lasts the least long, just a couple of seconds. Nobody gets surprised and walks around interacting while holding a state of surprise. It doesn't happen. But one of the indications that even if other things are muted or the person's holding it together well, one of the things that we see very obviously is those eyes opening up, especially the upper eyelids. So pay attention to those upper eyelids. And the reason they open up is because, again, surprise is a state of assessment. The body's trying to figure out how to react. So the same way the mouth opens up to get more oxygen, the eyes open up to get more information. And in the real world, this is the thing that you're going to see. If some news is dropped and someone's surprised by it, or even surprised that you know this, like, wait, how does this person know this? You'll very often see those upper eyelids open up, even if they're being pretty good with the rest of their behaviors. And the number one behavior that you guys spotted 143 times, which is really great because it's just her doing it, is hand to face or the hands covering the face. And I'm honestly quite shocked that he didn't do it, especially because she's in front of him, and very often in these situations, we might mirror someone, which might really indicate to what extent there was a disconnect. Like he didn't pay attention to her and he was just doing his own thing. Because I would expect in that moment, his hands are here, instead of, going around and like trying to, go downwards, you would think the first thing would happen is he would come up like this to block his face, but he didn't. Strange, I would expect him to. But anyways, she definitely did. First thing that happened, her hands came up. Now, hand to face is something that we often do see with stress, right? When we're stressed, the blood flow of the face changes. The research has shown this, and very often we feel that sensation, so the hand comes up like this. Also, when someone's being secretive or deceptive, it's not uncommon to have the hand come up like this around the mouth. That's not what this is. In this case, those hands shot up for the same reason that we discussed numerous times. It's as her trying to hide. She saw it, the surprise kicked in, and she immediately went to the response of, okay, I gotta hide, I gotta get away from this. So we put our hands up and we turn away. So in this case, does stress play an element of the hands coming to the face? Maybe. Does it have a part to play in the reason why they're still up there when she turns away? It very well can be. A bit of self-soothing there. But the reason they first came up is purely because she wants to hide from the situation. Okay, so in this scenario, it's quite obvious that pretty much everybody became a body language expert in this one moment, and everyone did such a great job at going, okay, something's going on here. But in the real world, there are going to be a lot of situations where you're faced with something similar, something awkward, someone's holding in a secret, there's something going on that won't be this obvious, and there's some very important things to note that are happening here that aren't these big, huge, obvious tells that you're more likely to see in more subtle situations. The first one I want to start with is huge, and this is something they teach FBI agents, CIA agents, and law enforcement, and it's a lack of synchronicity. And this is very, very important. So if in this scenario, we'd seen them, the camera goes to them and we see this awkwardness, they split apart, but they're still in sync with the crowd. They're still having a good time with the rest of the crowd. It wouldn't be as alarming. It's the fact that them, as well as the woman next to them, is very out of sync with the general mood. So this is something you could look for not only in conversations, but in all kinds of social interactions or social situations. Notice things that are falling out of sync. An example that comes to mind from my personal life is a couple of years ago, a friend of mine made a big positive announcement, and everyone in the group that was there was quite a few people, immediately celebrated. I saw what we call gravity-defying gestures, smiles, everybody went up, but there was one person, friend of mine, where I saw things went downwards like this. And although they were smiling, they were like, oh, congratulations, it didn't match the vibe of everybody else. It was more downwards, it was more closing in. And I instantly knew something's going on here. And of course there was. There was a reason why the person wasn't as happy in that situation. Speaking of incongruity, the second thing that's really important to spot is incongruity in people's relationships. So here we definitely see it. And it's, a lot of you said the different elements that go into this, but that incongruity is also very important. So if we look at this couple in the first frame, what do we see? How do we describe this? A happy couple. He's got his arms around her, she's leaning into him, they both have a relaxed look on their face. So this is more or less, a couple. If we go a few seconds later, all of a sudden, there's zero connection between them. They're split so far apart. So yes, obviously in this case it's huge, but in a lot of other cases it might not be that subtle. You might see two people who are in a boardroom, they're very close, they're presenting something, they're close together, there seems to be this togetherness, but the moment they leave the boardroom, their energy just separates. They walk in different directions. What's going on there? Is the relationship we saw in the boardroom not representative of how they actually feel towards each other? So basically it's when people aren't really looking, is the behavior between these two people the same as what they try to present in front of everyone else? And finally, the big one, and this is such an important detail because it definitely happened here, but in the real world, this is something subtle that you can look out for that in a lot of situations is going to tell you exactly what's going on. And it's not that people missed the different details of it, but it's the way it all comes together, the way it's supposed to evolve, and most importantly, something that's missing. So to understand this, we have to talk about freeze, fight, or flight, and fawn as well, that some people include part of that group. So very often in psychology classes, we hear fight or flight, fight or flight. And a lot of psychologists and people who study behavior say that that is only 2/3 of the equation and it's backwards because it's supposed to be freeze, fight, or flight. And some people add fawn to that. And I've gone back and forth with this. I've talked about it on the channel before, but whatever, if you want to put fawn in there, no problem. So this response, freeze and then fight, flight, and or fawn, is a basic human response to a threat or danger. But surprise isn't only necessarily something that we have when there's a threat or danger. It could also happen, good surprise. You like your friends surprise you or something. So if we remove the idea of threat or danger and just look at it as surprise, there's another reaction that could come from that, and it's happiness, right? So I surprise you with a gift. Like I say, hey, guess what? We're going to Disneyland this weekend. Or you walk into your house and your friends are throwing you a surprise party. There are a billion things that are a positive surprise, and they still start with the reaction of surprise because you're assessing. There's this new information that came in. First, you assess, and then you go to the next place. So if we forget freeze, fight, or flight and look at it more in terms of emotions, first it's surprise, and then that surprise lasts a couple of seconds and turns to something else. If it's a good surprise, it's happiness. So you go like this, surprise, and then it relaxes, or if it's a really big happy, oh my God, oh my God, you guys are here, man, thank you. So it goes immediately to happy, almost instantly. It's a very quick bridge. Now, on the other side of the positive responses, you have the negative ones. So for example, fear. Now, fear and surprise are very, very close. And behaviorally, eyebrows go up, eyes open up. The slight difference is that with surprise, the mouth opens up. With fear, it pulls back more. But surprise can turn into other negative things as well. Anger, so you get this surprise and it pisses you off and things clench, eyebrows come down, the eyes will still stay open because you're still have that glare. So it might turn into anger, it might turn into sadness, right? So like this, and then, oh no, like it makes you things start to droop. So it could turn into any one of the negative emotions as well. But the bottom line is this, in situations like this one, even if it's infinitely more subtle, when something new is introduced that's surprising, shocking, or new, if it's positive, and if the person is in a positive state, that surprise doesn't just fade. We never go surprise and that's it. It turns into something else. And if it's not positive, then it has to be negative. What I mean by that is if after the surprise, you don't see a smile, you don't see an excitement, you don't see some kind of positive thing, you can pretty confidently assume that the person's feelings towards this or the situation is negative. In this case, the smile even went away. He was smiling, then we have a surprise, and the smile is gone. So basically what I'm saying is look for a much more muted version of this, but the main key thing is that after the surprise, if it's not positive, something's going on. So does that surprise turn into disengagement? Does it turn into tension? Does it turn into retreating into oneself? Does it turn into distancing or turning their body away from the situation? It might not be as obvious as this, but are there still these little notes, little elements of negativity after the surprise. If all is well, surprise should turn into positivity. And in most cases, an overwhelming majority of cases on these jumbotrons, that's what you see. The camera cuts maybe to a couple, maybe whatever it is, maybe a group, and you see the surprise, like, oh my God, look. And they might even let each other know, look, we're on the jumbotron. But it's that surprise when they realize eyebrows, eyes, mouth, and then that turns into some kind of celebration. Yeah, we high five, we do some kind of dance, maybe a hug, if it's a couple, you might see a kiss or something. Whatever it is, surprise, positivity. All right, so there it was. And before we get to the conclusion, I just want to clarify that I know throughout the video I was happy and cheery and excited. And it's a little bit because I kind of really like this format of, having you guys chime in and do this like game show style. And then the second thing is because there are elements of this that I find comically idiotic. And I know that as a behavioral analyst, I'm supposed to keep morality out of this and just talk about behaviors. And I promise you that's what I will do 99% of the time, but I have a soft spot for infidelity. I think it's an awful thing. Of all the moral kind of wrong things people could do, it's one of the ones that I have such little respect for because I hate deception. And so I hate infidelity. I hate the destruction it leaves in its wake. And these people have families. It's a horrible thing you're doing. But on top of it all, you're doing it in public where there's all these cameras. Sometimes I'm laughing, I guess, out of just maybe nervousness or how stupid I think this is, or maybe even discomfort, but it's never out of laughing at the situation. I don't think the situation itself is funny at all. I can't imagine what their loved ones are going through, and I wish them courage in these insanely ridiculous times. In conclusion, I don't think there's much to say. I think everyone in the world became a very effective body language analyst in this moment, and there are these situations that happen every now and then where we realize just how powerful body language could be because we all got it. But I think the best lesson here is to look at this and go, okay, if it was much more muted, what are the subtleties here that I could spot in the real world? And we went through those earlier, some more subtle things that in the real world won't be this obvious, but will allow you to know something's not right here. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this. Let me know how much of the list you got right. And also let me know what you thought of this format, where I get your guys' input and I'll make a list and go through it. Let me know in the comments and I'll see you on the next one.